The following is a sponsored episode of the Broken Brain Podcast, sponsored by Three Rivers Training Center and Carol Miles, licensed clinical social worker, with some upcoming opportunities for EMDR basic training for mental health clinicians. Stay tuned to learn more about this training opportunity and go to carolmiles.com to learn more.
The Broken Brain.
Well, I'm here with Carol Miles talking about the upcoming trainings and really training in general for EMDR, the way that you do it. We've got this one coming up in September that as I said before on the podcast, I'm not only is Three Rivers now a sponsor of the show, but I'm going to be right there with everybody as a student. I'm really excited to be there for this training and to see how it goes. So, Carol, hi. How are you?
Hi, and we are delighted to have you help with this process and then to learn EMDR. Anytime I can teach anybody EMDR therapy, I'm thrilled.
And that's one thing that, as we were talking about this getting going, you have a breadth of experience both with EMDR and with training EMDR. You've really gotten heavily into that in your career, right?
Yeah, I graduated from grad school in 1981 with an MSW. And then it wasn't until 2007, after Hurricane Katrina devastated New Orleans, that I got trained in New Orleans in EMDR. And I wasn't really even sure that I wanted to get trained in EMDR, really, for sure. I knew what I thought it was, but I didn't know what it was. And then at the end of that training, which was 2 weekends, kind of similar to the training I'm about to give, which will be 2 3-day sessions, I was completely turned on to this is it. This is what I want to do. And I got really involved then and have never looked back from that point.
I find that's what a lot of people's experience is if they've not been through training and used EMDR or had it themselves in the counselor or the client seat. A lot of times we know a bit about it, but we don't know what it is. And I remember when I was talking to Viviana, your co-trainer, she was talking about how at first sometimes people go like, what? I don't know. I don't know about this.
Right.
And I think that's shrinking. More and more people are realizing what an evidence-based treatment this is. But coming at it as you were, not knowing what it was, what were some of the things that you found appealing or that turned you really on to EMDR?
Well, probably the thing that meant the most to me was the transformation that I could see in my office with my clients. I mean, I just felt like I'd been a therapist for a really long time. I'd helped a lot of people in a lot of different ways. I worked with folks who had eating disorders as a subspecialty of the work I did in clinical social work. And so I'd seen people, turn their lives around in really important ways. But this was in just an entirely different process. Things often happen in session today where I think, how would I have gotten there with my old skills? I don't know that I would have known to ask that question. I don't know how that would have happened. That you have clients who are feeling kind of guarded about the information that they want to give to you. And with EMDR, you don't have to know everything that they're thinking or that's going on with them. And then they still, in spite of that, kind of move through it. And then sometimes they'll, at that point, will reveal more of what they didn't tell you. You remember the radio newscaster who used to say, and the rest of the story. And
Paul Harvey.
That's right, Paul Harvey. I had that happen earlier today in an EMDR intensive I was doing with somebody where there was a big episode that occurred that was a trauma that she wanted to work on. And come to find out, there was a rest of the story to that one. And so that was fascinating to hear. And it really transforms the work. And I don't know how I would have asked for this particular piece of information. It's pretty common for me to think, wow, I'm just like standing alongside, looking at people's brains heal themselves, and I'm in awe.
And ideally, that's what often people will find after even a fewer number of sessions than they may think, that they start to experience some change in symptoms and day-to-day functioning. It's one of the things that's very exciting about EMDR. Whereas some people's worry with therapy is that they'll come and talk and kind of going back to the old psychoanalytic days, it was almost intentional to be in for years, right?
Right. And I think that people can be in EMDR therapy for a long period of time, depending on what sort of symptoms and difficulties, traumas they've had. But you do want to see change. And I'm cool with incremental change, but I like big change. And so watching the big changes that occur with EMDR therapy is, and it's a humbling experience for me. I will say I was pretty sure that I knew a lot when I became an EMDR therapist, and I clearly did not know everything. Still don't know everything, but I feel like your brain knows how to heal you. And if we can unlock what's kind of stopped up there or blocked, then your brain knows the right thing to do to help you get better.
And that's a great underpinning, a great theory, I think, especially with humanistic and positive psychology being something that's been such a big part of the modern world. As therapists who are coming to hear this message and are coming to train, that are maybe looking to either up their skills, kind of refresh themselves, or maybe they're coming in never having done EMDR before, what would you say to people about what it can do for their practice? I mean, aside from just, obviously helping clients we're talking about, but how does it shape up and change what people are finding in their own clinical practice?
Well, one thing that I will say is that EMDR, really since the Oprah show with Prince Harry, has definitely been trending. So for those of you who don't know, Prince Harry had EMDR therapy for some of the traumas that I think we all do know about, the loss of his mother when he was a boy. And so he talks about that very freely in that interview with Oprah. And it's amazing to see the change that he's made. So it's kind of trending. It's on people's mind periodically. And my husband will holler at me and say, come see this on TV. They're doing EMDR in a TV show or a movie. And so there's a lot of folks who are now asking for EMDR. So they're Googling it up, trying to see who in town is the EMDR therapist. They're looking on Psychology Today, who's got it set up there as a specialty. People are looking for it. So it changes your practice that way, but it also changes your practice from the kind of drudgery feeling that sometimes we can get as therapists. I remember in probably the 90s having a period where I thought, oh man, I'm just trudging through the mud here. And I want to, maybe I'll just be a plumber instead. I mean, this is like really slow change, and feeling tired of some of that. And I don't have that now. I mean, I do have some clients that are harder than others, that have much more complex trauma, dissociative identity disorder, with all sorts of things. But I generally, even with those folks, I feel like, wow, look at the mountain we just climbed. And I'm excited, I'm exhilarated about the process.
Well, one of the most important things when you're climbing anything is having a foothold or some leverage. And I find that sometimes that's one of the hardest things about problem solving and talk therapy, is kind of trying to find a new angle or somewhere to look at something differently. Once again, can be quite useful. But, as you're describing that, it reminds me of a psychologist who came on the podcast not too long ago, who said we have a current rate of something like 50% burnout. In the medical field, and specifically in therapy, we're seeing that with psychotherapists as well. And so anything that helps with that helps the therapist, and also, of course, then helps all the people who need therapy, so we don't lose half our therapists out there in the world.
Right. And we need therapy more than ever after what the world's been through most recently, between the uncovering of the massive difficulties in our systems with regard to race, and before that, the onset of the pandemic. The last 3 years are head spinning in terms of the impact of all the traumas on the people of the world. And so it's really important for us to be able to be there and be available to help our clients feel like they have a life that they want to live and that they can enjoy and engage in.
I kind of wonder right now how many people are walking around with a level of trauma that I think we've all accepted that there's a low-key amount of trauma that we're all carrying around. But I wonder how many are carrying around a clinical level, or a level that needs / could definitely benefit from treatment.
When we think about trauma, oftentimes we think about big traumas, like you're in an earthquake, and that certainly is a big trauma. But on the other hand, trauma may come from growing up in a family where you didn't get what you needed. So you were always longing for the approval and love of your parents and always falling short as a perfectionistic kind of system may have been the case, or you grew up in a family where you found yourselves at odds in the community that you were in with your sexual identity and with your family, and struggled with those things. Those are not exactly the same thing as having been in a war, but they can certainly result in significant difficulties for people in their lives, impacting their not only their relationships, but also how they feel about themselves, how they manage to be productive at work, all those pieces.
I've noticed too that as I've studied different ways of treating trauma, I've really gotten better at identifying it. And you can tell when you see elements of that. I mean, a big push now in therapy is being trauma informed, right? So you bring
Right.
that to the client and they say, oh my gosh, yes, that is there. And so then you not only have something you can do about it, but you also recognize here's an underlying issue that maybe we're not getting to.
I think that the phrase that Oprah used in that interview that I was talking about earlier is it's the thing that happened to you. What happened to you? And what happened to you might be that you didn't get what you needed or that a tree fell on your house. But it's what happened to you. And that's really what gets in the way. So we have the part of the brain that is the emotional part of the brain, and then we have the rational part of the brain, right? So the emotional part of the brain, when it gets overwhelmed, it doesn't connect well with the other part of the brain that is able to think and problem solve. And we get kind of stuck with that when we're overwhelmed. Bessel van der Kolk talks about it being wordless terror. People get all caught up in that piece. And it's literally, well, I don't know how literal this is, but my picture in my mind is that there is a place in their brain where things are not moving the way they're supposed to be. And what we do with the EMDR is unlock that place so that they can then resume the normal healing functioning of the brain. They're able to tap into the adaptive information processing system that wants to heal, that wants to help them move forward, grow and change, be creative and healthy. And so once they can tap in and move forward, move through that, then their brain just takes off. And I've had clients where we worked through some big piece of work, and then suddenly they just take off and do all kinds of things differently. And it's a delight to watch those things happen.
How did you decide to get into training EMDR?
Well, I was really pushed off the ledge on that one. So when I first got trained, I was fortunate enough to meet up with some folks in EMDR land, I like to call it, with some other really incredible women who had come to New Orleans to help and come to the Gulf Coast to help after Katrina. And so I met up with these folks, and they kept coming back to New Orleans and doing trainings. And I kind of was the person who did the logistics for them and made everything work. And then I'd go out to dinner with them and do different things. And so we got to know each other really well. And these were the women that I would call and I would say, I've got a problem with this case. What am I doing wrong? Help me out here in the beginning. And one of them, Sue Evans, who's from Minneapolis, Minnesota, who's passed on, she had pancreatic cancer, had a huge influence on me. She took me through the process of becoming a consultant. I got certified with someone else as a consultant and then became a consultant myself. And Sue said, you've got to be a trainer. At that point, I had been on adjunct faculty in Tulane School of Social Work for many years, loved teaching. So it wasn't that far of a reach for me, but I was super hesitant. And I said, Sue, I can't do that. Even though I've been a teacher for years, I'm not really that young. I could be a trainer, but I haven't been an EMDR therapist very long. I don't know. I mean, I was just in awe about these mentors and how much they knew. I don't know what you know. And Sue says, well, you can learn it. And sure enough, she and Karen Alter Reed, who's from Connecticut, who is still around, I see regularly, she and I just did a refresher course together, said, come on, you can do this. But I was really kind of panicky about it. I really was thinking, I just think I'm not smart enough to do this. So I got my own EMDR therapy. I got a therapist who helped me work through that block in this area. And so in 2015, I did my first EMDR training, and I had my dream team there to help support me. Karen and Sue were there, and also Sandy Kaplan. And they were fabulous in saying, yes, you can do this. And I've been training ever since.
And you've trained quite a few populations of therapists. And by that, I mean people who treat different populations and very
Oh,
specific settings as well as in general, right?
oh, absolutely. So I've worked with folks who work with clients in nursing homes. I've worked with folks who deal with clients in prisons. I've trained folks who work with children, adolescents, families, couples, folks with depression, addiction, issues around. One lady recently works part of a home health agency that provides ventilators for folks. And so she's been working with compliance issues for the doctors that are prescribing this and folks not wanting to use their vent. And so, working with folks around all these different areas. And I don't necessarily, my practice is adults and my practice is just exactly the way that it was even before I started EMDR therapy. But I learned enough about all those other areas to be able to, if I don't know the answer, I know who to get the answer from. So I'm not a specialist in working with pain, but I know where those answers are. I'm not a specialist in working with addiction, but I know where those answers are. And so I like to connect people to advanced trainings or additional consultation to help them move more in specialized areas. But I've worked with pretty wide range of trainees at this point since 2015.
Right. Who would be ideal to take this course that's coming up?
So the course that's coming up is specifically formatted to train basic training in EMDR. So a basic training in EMDR is what EMDRIA requires every trainer to teach. And that gives you all the basic skills that you need to have to go out and employ it in your practice. We've added to it some supplemental material that is for working with kids and families. And that grew out of a project that I'm involved with in Louisiana, which is specifically geared to working with providers of Medicaid in Louisiana. The state of Louisiana, unbelievably so, has set up this system where they do evidence-based trainings, evidence-based practice trainings for therapists in Louisiana who are Medicaid providers for free.
I think that's quite a remarkable thing, and not only that the trainings are for free, but that you can get EMDR while on Medicare, Medicaid. I mean, a lot of places that's not the case.
Yes, and so in Louisiana, there's now 2 years of trainees that I've trained who've received this training for free, which is great. So as part of that grant required the supplemental material working with children. So I partnered with Viviana Triana, who you interviewed before, because I knew Viviana from another EMDRIA committee that I was on and wanted to have folks working with me in that training who could gear their examples and their modifications that they worked with kids. So we came out of that and we thought, well, this is really cool. The stuff that we've put together here for Louisiana, for the Medicaid providers, let's take the show on the road and introduce it to other folks, because there are a lot of people who work with children who they do the whole training in EMDR and then they got to go find someplace else to go to learn the modifications. So we thought, okay, well, let's gear ourselves this way. So we, I think, encompass both the person who has an adult practice and the person who has a practice that includes kids. So we've got that whole range. So ideally, the biggest thing you got to have is clients to work with. Whatever you got, we can do it.
So one of the things that I think people always ask themselves when they're going to a training is, can I actually use this? And there's a lot of trainings that are a little more vague and not as skills-based that we go to and get inspired and then never think of again, right? If I'm a clinician who's then learning EMDR from a training like this, how am I going to incorporate that in? Especially maybe if I've been practicing for a long time and I have things that I do and I want to add this on. What does that look like for people?
That's a great question. I think that when you take a course in EMDR, you should be able to, if it's an EMDRIA approved course, you should be able to go right out and incorporate that into your practice. Part of the way that integration into your practice is facilitated is that it is required by any EMDRIA approved training that you get additional consultation. So you get the course and 10 hours of consultation with an approved consultant who can help you figure out how to work with your clients the best way. So if you have extremely complex clients, that consultation is extremely important to you. If you have a lot of clients who have kind of a simple issue to deal with and they can recover quickly, or if you have clients for whom modifications need to occur, like in working with children. If you're a play therapist, certainly play therapy is incorporated well with EMDR. The training that I had in grad school, this is before we really taught CBT in grad school. I got out. So I learned a lot of stuff after grad school, but in grad school, I learned a lot about psychoanalytic constructs and a little bit about behaviorism. Then I got out. Soon after that, I learned about solution focused, CBT, a variety of other tools. And you're right, I would go to some of those trainings and I would think, well, okay, that was fun, and not really use anything. But a lot of it would get smattered through all throughout the way that I did therapy. And one of them in particular, DBT. I spent 8 years teaching DBT skills in a group setting. And I use all of that in the work that I do. So the lens that I put on as an EMDR therapist is an adaptive information processing lens. And that means that thing about your brain wants to heal itself. Well, I really believe that. And so I'm looking for what gets in the way of your brain healing itself and is creating psychopathology or symptoms or discomfort. So how can we work with that? So if it takes a DBT skill to assist in that process, if it takes mindfulness, or if it takes behaviorism, let's go out and actually, you have that phobia, we work through the trauma of it. Now you got to go and practice it, or there are a lot of things that go hand in glove with EMDR therapy really well. It's the basic understanding of how the brain will heal you, if it can heal you, when things get out of its way, that makes the big difference in how you see the world as a therapist. So all those other pieces, everything you've already learned as a therapist is applicable here. But it's the theoretical basis that's going to shift and change. It sort of rocked my world in terms of figuring things out. And then it all kind of settles back in a way that makes a lot more sense, at least to me, about how to proceed with this client. So I have sessions where we're just talking. I'm not using bilateral stimulation at all, which is sort of the eye movements is kind of the big thing everybody thinks of. But there are times where I'm not, and there are times where I am. And so it's all, the relationship is still important. All those things that you learned in grad school and beyond are still there, but you're going to look at them from a different angle. I no longer believe the way you think about it is what's causing the problems with your feelings or your behavior. I do think how you think about it influences those things. But I don't believe that's the source of psychopathology. So I think it is what's in the way. What happened to you gets in the way. That's the source of psychopathology.
And getting out of our heads, actually, and not overthinking the anxiety with the trauma can be so freeing. And especially with the research that they're doing about the way the body stores trauma and the nerves and some of the body's nerves that aren't even in the brain, right? So that are interacting with that.
Yeah, it all fits together. Your gut, all the autoimmune disorders, all those pieces that are so impacted by trauma in people's lives. When the ACEs study came out, the Adverse Childhood Experiences study came out, which has been augmented through a Philadelphia study that adds in all of the kind of social constructs as well and racial trauma constructs. That really was transformational, I think, in a lot of ways, because people started going, oh, so you had that stuff happen, you watched that stuff, or you were in that stuff when you were a kid, and then all these other things happen, and that's connected. Duh, yeah, okay, good. So yeah, I think there's a lot that we're figuring out. And what I love about EMDR also is we have this part where we look at all the components of trauma and we address all of those pieces as we go into the trauma work. And then we also address the past, the present, and the future. So as we look at all of those pieces, we really hit it hard. And so things move, things change.
Well, one of the things that I spring on everybody that I interview is at the end of our talk, I always ask people if they have a charity or a nonprofit or something that they like to remind people exists or tell people about. And so this is no different. And it can be related to what we're talking about, or it doesn't have to be. Do you have anything that you would encourage people to be aware of?
So I give to a lot of different charities, but one that is very close to my heart. So I live in the greater New Orleans area. I have a Mardi Gras crew. Our Mardi Gras crew started, and in the first year, that one of our founding members had breast cancer. And so our philanthropy is to donate to breast cancer. And here in the region that I'm in, there's something called Breastoration. So this particular charity is something that my group gives to, and that is near and dear to my heart, certainly. And we had several other members of our crew, we call them crews, over the years who died of breast cancer. And so my sister-in-law died of pancreatic cancer, but then we had two other members that died related to breast cancer. And the first one who had breast cancer has lived. So that's good news. But I certainly would say Restoration in New Orleans would certainly be a great place to donate to if people are looking for someplace to put their money.
That's a wonderful thing. I lost an aunt to breast cancer as well, so I'll echo those thoughts as much. Well, Carol, thank you so much. And let's mention real quick where people find Three Rivers so that they can sign up for this training. What's your website?
My website is carolmiles.com. So it's Carol like Christmas Carol, miles like 100 miles, Carol Miles, no break.com. And if you go there, you'll see there are headings, and you'll see the section on basic training. And you can go straight there and find out more about this training. It's going to be offered September 7th through 9th, and then part 2 will be October 12th through 14th. It's in Central Time, 8:30 to 5 during those days. And I really encourage people to take those 6 days, block them out, don't plan anything else during those days.
It'll be an all-inclusive training. Excited to be there and be a part of it. And I will say, I'm going to put a little, since theoretically the internet and stuff that's on it is forever, if anyone's coming across this after those dates in 2022, you should still go to the website because there's more scheduled by the time you hear this as well.
Great.
Thanks so much, Carol.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Courtemp Arts Podcast Network. To listen to more Courtemp Arts shows, visit courtemparts.com.